Business news from the Capital Region. This is Washington Business Report with ABC7 national correspondent Rebecca Cooper.
Thanks for joining us for a fresh look at business and finance and how it affects you. There's a lot to talk about this week. The GOP says it's taking the president and Obamacare to court. Businesses side with the president's actions on immigration, but want him to do more. And the Pentagon says it's time for more innovation to win big contracts. We'll tackle it all in the roundtable. And in our small business spotlight, learn key tricks to making teleworking work for you. But first, our one-on-one. This week, we sat down with the man who created and leads one of the world's most recognizable names in online retail, Overstock.com. Still, Patrick Byrne is anything but your typical CEO. Patrick Byrne, thanks for joining us for Washington Business Report. You know, usually I start by just introducing someone, CEO of Overstock.com, and asking them immediately about business. But you're a little harder to quantify. Let me tick off for you. Overstock CEO, e-commerce pioneer, former pro boxer, martial artist, three-time cancer survivor, virtual currency advocate, virtual stock market founder, also an advocate for small businesses, for developing country businesses, for school choice, for shelter pets, for overthrowing Wall Street, Warren Buffett protege. You're pretty hard to sum up. Out of all those different things, right now, what inspires you the most?
Well, guilty as charged, first of all, and that's all sound and fury signifying nothing, I can assure you. The two issues that concern me the most are education and Wall Street. The two propellers on the ship that is our republic are how we form human capital and how we marry it to financial capital. And how we form human capital, that's education, and marrying it to financial capital, that's Wall Street. Those are the two things that we really have to fix to get our country moving.
You have been selected by your peers as one of the most admired CEOs in America.
They were grading on a curve that day, I think.
You've got a hugely successful company that you, in essence, founded and grew and took public. And yet you do have this philosophy of the corporate world is broken, Wall Street is broken. So you're, in one sentence, described as the most admired CEO. Others describe you as brilliant. Others describe you as eccentric.
Oh, well, I get that a lot.
How do you marry your two worlds? You're still running this company. You're still innovating. You're still growing this company, and yet you're a disruptor. How do you marry those two worlds?
Well, I never gave up when I became the CEO, I never realized people expected me to give up my First Amendment rights. I don't remember that. I've got a lot of opinions on how things can be improved. Actually, being a CEO and being out on Wall Street since 2002, I figured out a lot of the bad things. You know, I was out there in the mix, out there with the brokers and the hedge funds and stuff, and it became very obvious to me there was a lot of criminality going on, and how some hedge funds were working together to do some illegal things. They're most of the guys you read about in the headlines today who have gotten indicted and go to jail. And so I started thinking about how that could be exposed, and eventually I decided that Washington was not really doing its job protecting us, and I started thinking about other ways we could approach the problem, and technology. This technology, when it presented itself, the technology of Bitcoin and the blockchain, I realized, boy, the big killer app here isn't a currency, isn't cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin, but it's creating a crypto finance system, a stock market based on this technology, rather than the Wall Street as it exists.
Let's talk about Overstock, because you've said you've got how many, 1,500 colleagues or more is what you call them at your company, and you seem to say that you really like for them to come up with their own solutions and their own ideas, and you've proven it by letting people within the company, people who start off as temps, have taken you all the way to branding and other things.
That one's now president. Stormy Simon started as an $8 an hour temp, and over 12 years she rose to the president. She's like my own Erin Brockovich, I like to say.
She had great ideas, and she came to you with those ideas, but it takes a CEO who's willing to say, okay, former temp, take it all the way. What is your philosophy of management?
My philosophy of management is that the Dilbert cartoons are correct. They portray the pointy-haired manager in the corner, and he's sitting there thinking he has all the knowledge and he's going to make all the decisions, and he makes these horrible decisions. The truth is, what economists call the knowledge frontier, that's where the decisions should be made. The people who have the knowledge are the customer service agents, they're the buyers, they're the people on the marketing floor. They have the knowledge. My job is creating the institutions such that they can make the decisions that push the company forward. I don't want to be the pointy-haired manager in the corner trying to make decisions and just ruling by edict. I want them making the decisions, and I just design the institutions that within the company that let them do that.
So let's start with how you took Overstock and grew it and made it into what it is. It was your idea in the beginning. Let's take these street liquidators, people on the street who have 100 mattresses they're trying to get rid of, and let's take that model and make it bigger. Suffice to say, you're the biggest now as a liquidator of stock.
Well, first of all, I must commend you. You've done your homework better than just about any journalist I've ever spoken to. It actually started, when I think back, I went to Walt Whitman High in Bethesda, Maryland, and I knew this fellow named Charlie Chaluka, we called him, this tough Greek kid who, whatever you wanted, when I was in high school, he'd say, yeah, I got a cousin in the warehouse, I'll get it for you real cheap. You know, a CB radio, a car battery. We never quite understood.
We love those friends of ours.
Yeah, we do. And we never quite understood where it was all coming from. Was it hot or something? Well, I gradually learned that no, this guy was just plugged into this network of what are called jobbers. And they tend to be bada bing, bada boom. I know the guy who knows the guy. I got this. I know this guy at the warehouse. I'll get it. Those kind of guys. But and what I realized was that what we could do was form a company and hire about a dozen of those Charlies, bring them in and have them wheeling and dealing. We'd be like one of those discount outlet stores you see on a back street in Brooklyn, getting good stuff from warehouses, from companies that went bankrupt, things like that. We wouldn't have everything that Amazon had, but what we did have, we would be able to sell much more cheaply. So we went from the original idea of that sort of jobbing and liquidating to becoming more of a general merchandise site, but still, I've also had this very fortunate relationship. When I was about 13, this fellow I was living in Bethesda, this fellow from Nebraska. Well, I thought he was a farmer because he was this Nebraska guy. He'd show up in sort of J.C. Penney suits, brown shoes, and a black belt. I remember kidding about that when I was 13. Even at 13, I knew, and he would teach me. He made the fantastic amount of time for me. He would come and visit, stay in our home. And he would talk about, suppose I had an acre of corn and 400 bushels per acre, and he'd walk me through these examples and teach me stuff. And I thought, gee, but he also talked about stocks. And I thought, gee, this is this farmer who seems to know a lot about stocks. Well, when I was in, we were great friends. And when I was in college, I started to see his name in the paper for the first time. His name's Warren Buffett. And he was sort of this Dutch uncle to me, teaching me about business.
Through your whole life?
Through my whole life. In fact, and I'm kind of funny, and in the height of the dot-com boom in late 1999, people were dropping out of business school and on a one-page business plan, going and raising $100 million. And I went out and I had worked for Buffett. I'd run my own company. I thought, gee, it's going to be very easy for me to raise money. I went up and down Sand Hill Road in Silicon Valley, seeing 80 venture capitalists trying to raise money. And I was turned down by 80 venture capitalists. And then this glorious thing happened called the dot-com crash. And a bunch of companies went under. And we discovered the infrastructure we had set up to handle liquidating excess inventory worked very well on bankruptcies. So we started liquidating these bankrupt dot-coms. I ended up actually liquidating 18 bankrupt dot-coms that had been funded by the same venture capitalists who turned me down for money. I promise I'm much too mature to take any satisfaction from that. But Doonesbury actually did a series on us called a guy with exactly that business model called myvulture.com. So there's an old Doonesbury series that's basically based, actually Chris Cuomo from ABC came and did a story on us once, and he said, how do you feel about making money off the distress of other companies? And I said, well, Warren Buffett taught me the first rule of business is, if you're not going to kick a man when he's down, when are you going to kick him?
Well, our conversation with Patrick Byrne has just begun. We're going to air the rest of my conversation with him next week, where he talks about taking on Wall Street, his lawsuits, and his brushes with death.